The forest floor yielded softly beneath his bare feet, a familiar comfort. Finn knew every root, every stone, every whisper of the wind through the ancient trees. His days unfolded in a rhythm as old as the earth itself, simple and true. He spent his mornings helping his mother with the chickens, their clucking a cheerful chorus in the crisp air. The scent of pine and damp earth was his world, a sanctuary of quiet contentment. He knew nothing of crowns or castles, only the warmth of the sun on his skin and the gentle hum of a life well lived. Then, a shadow fell, not from the clouds, but from a sudden, terrifying presence. A thick hand, rough and unyielding, clamped over his mouth, stifling the cry that rose in his throat. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. A raspy voice, close to his ear, hissed a single, chilling command, "Quiet, boy." The words were a cold blade, slicing through the peace of his morning. He struggled, a desperate, futile thrashing against an unseen force. A burlap sack, coarse and suffocating, was pulled over his head. Darkness descended, absolute and immediate, pressing in on him. His muffled cries were swallowed by the thick fabric, lost in the sudden, terrifying void. He was lifted, then thrown, a helpless bundle, into something hard and rattling. The jolting began instantly, a relentless, disorienting motion that stole his breath. His simple life, in that single, brutal moment, was irrevocably shattered. The days that followed blurred into an endless cycle of jolts and stale bread. He existed in a perpetual state of disoriented darkness, the constant movement of the cart his only reality. Fear was a cold, constant companion, gnawing at the edges of his consciousness. He lost all sense of time, of direction, of who he was or where he was going. The world outside the sack was a distant, terrifying mystery. He clung to the memory of his mother's face, a fragile anchor in the overwhelming void. Then, with a sudden, violent rip, the sack was torn away. Blinding sunlight assaulted his eyes, forcing a gasp from his lungs. He blinked, disoriented, his vision slowly adjusting to the harsh glare. He stood in a vast, stone courtyard, surrounded by towering walls that seemed to scrape the sky. The air was heavy with the scent of old stone and something he couldn't quite place, something grand and imposing. This was not his forest. A figure emerged from the shadows of an archway, tall and severe, her gaze piercing. She was Lyra, though he did not know her name then. Her voice, when she spoke, was clear and commanding, echoing in the vast space. "Alara," she stated, her voice devoid of warmth, "you are finally here." The name hung in the air, alien and unsettling. Finn felt a jolt of confusion, a desperate need to correct her. "No," he stammered, his voice hoarse from disuse, "my name is Finn. I live in the forest. I help my mother with the chickens." He clung to his identity, to the simple truth of his life, as if it were a lifeline. Lyra's expression remained unyielding. "Your name," she corrected, her voice firm, "is Alara. You are the son of King Theron." The words struck him like a physical blow, shattering the last vestiges of his known world. She explained, her voice a steady drone of unbelievable facts, how he had been hidden for 7 years. Protected from Regent Valerius, the man who had seized his father's throne. His entire life, a carefully constructed lie, designed to keep him safe. Then came the declaration, a pronouncement that stole his breath and solidified his terror. "Now," Lyra stated, her eyes fixed on his, "the time has come to reclaim what is yours." The weight of her words was immense, crushing. He was a boy who knew only the forest, who feared nothing more than a sudden storm. The idea of being a king, of reclaiming a throne, was a monstrous, impossible burden. Fear, cold and absolute, settled deep in his bones. The transformation began immediately, relentless and unforgiving. Lyra was a taskmaster, her demands absolute, her patience non-existent. He was no longer Finn, he was Alara, and Alara had a destiny to fulfill. He learned to wield a sword, the heavy steel feeling alien and clumsy in his hands at first. The clash of metal against metal became the soundtrack to his days, a harsh, percussive rhythm of pain and progress. His muscles ached, his hands blistered, but Lyra never relented. Hours were spent poring over ancient texts, studying the history of his kingdom, the intricate strategies of past wars. Names, dates, alliances, betrays, they swirled in his mind, a dizzying tapestry of a world he never knew existed. He struggled to grasp the complexities, his mind yearning for the simplicity of the forest. He mastered the complex lineage of his kingdom, the names of forgotten kings and queens, their triumphs and their failures. Lyra demanded perfection, never offering a word of praise, only a curt nod or a sharp correction. He felt like a vessel being filled, not with knowledge, but with an unbearable weight. Physical and mental exhaustion became his constant companions. He often collapsed at the end of the day, his body screaming in protest, his mind a jumble of facts and figures. The weight of his new identity pressed down on him, threatening to crush him. He struggled with the enormity of it all, the sudden, violent shift from a simple boy to a king in waiting. There were moments of despair, when he longed for the quiet anonymity of his past life, for the comfort of his mother's presence. He questioned everything, his purpose, his ability, his very right to this impossible burden. But Lyra, sensing his wavering resolve, would speak of the people. She would describe the suffering under Valerius, the hunger, the fear, the injustice. Her words painted vivid pictures of a kingdom in despair, a people yearning for a true leader. It was the thought of their suffering, the silent plea of a kingdom he had never known, that fueled his perseverance. Duty, a concept once foreign, began to take root, slowly replacing his fear with a grim determination. He would not be Finn, the boy who ran from shadows. He would be Alara, the king who fought for his people. The day came, heralded by a distant roar that grew into a thunderous clamor. A rebel force, gathered in secret, breached the castle walls. The air filled with the chaos of battle, the shouts of men, the desperate cries of the wounded. The clanging of swords echoed through the stone corridors, a symphony of violence. Alara, clad in hastily donned armor, felt a surge of adrenaline, a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. This was it. The moment he had been trained for. He followed Lyra, her movements swift and purposeful, through the labyrinthine passages. The sounds of conflict grew louder, more immediate, as they neared the heart of the castle. His heart pounded, a drumbeat of destiny. They burst into the throne room, a scene of desperate struggle. Valerius, pale and trembling, stood before the throne, his eyes wide with a desperate fear. He was no longer the imposing regent, but a cornered animal. Alara stepped forward, his voice, though still young, resonating with a newfound strength. "I am Alara," he declared, his gaze fixed on the usurper, son of Theron. "The true king!" The words were a challenge, a reclamation. Valerius, his face contorted with rage and desperation, lunged forward. A hidden dagger, glinting wickedly, appeared in his hand, aimed directly at Alara's heart. It was a desperate, final act of defiance. But Lyra was swifter. With a blur of motion, she intercepted Valerius, her own blade flashing. The confrontation was swift, decisive. Valerius fell, his reign of terror brought to an abrupt, violent end. Silence descended upon the throne room, heavy and profound. Alara stood before the cold, imposing throne, its dark wood gleaming in the filtered light. It was larger, more formidable than he had ever imagined. He looked out at the faces of his people, a sea of hopeful and fearful expressions. They watched him, their future resting on his shoulders. The weight of their expectations was immense, a tangible presence in the air. A strange calm settled over him, a quiet understanding. The fear that had been his constant companion for so long began to recede, replaced by something new, something solid. He was no longer the frightened boy, the reluctant heir. He was a figure of strength, forged in the crucible of hardship and duty. A quiet, confident chuckle escaped his lips, a small, almost imperceptible smile touched his mouth. The boy who had helped his mother with chickens was gone. He raised his hand, slowly, deliberately. His fingers, once accustomed to the feel of forest earth, now found the smooth, cold armrest of the throne. He placed his hand steadily upon it, a silent embrace of his destiny.